let's make this clear. The Protestants, some of the people you see in the highest non-Catholic positions in the world are, I'm just saying this, you need rowdy Piper glasses to see, and if you guys finally figure it out that the Democrats and the Republicans and all of those entities that you're seeing basically trying to take your ability to defend yourself against what's coming, look at it this way. A good position to take is you don't surrender your guns, or guess what? It's not a question of hunting, it's you becoming the hunted. And I couldn't be more serious, but the point that people have got to understand is this, is that it's everyone's responsibility to take what they're hearing tonight from Tom Horn, Steve Quayle, and you take it to the Lord in prayer. If you don't know Jesus, you should ask him to reveal himself to you, because in this battle that's going on in the unseen world, and whether it's with infrared or ultraviolet, by the way, there are certain alien entities that can only be seen in a UV light versus infrared. There are different ends of the spectrum. The point being is that we are now involved in a battle where it used to be theoretical. Basically, people could say it's spiritual, theological. Right now, it's in everyone's face. It's in everyone's front yard. And it's soon going to be the things of men's nightmares will be common as the daily events and the daily headlines. So please, ladies and gentlemen, I want to share something, Doug, real quick. When I wrote the book, Aliens and Fallen Angels, The Sexual Corruption of the Human Race, I think the title was so fit. And Tom, I think you even, when we first met each other a decade and a half ago or whatever, you even remarked on that. The fact that you would use that puts such a defined aliens and fallen angels, the sexual corruption of the human race. Now you see, even in the whole realm of, and I won't go into the details, but in the realm of sexual enhancement, you get into the realm of perpetual arousal, you get into the realm, all this stuff has been before. And you even mentioned it, Tom. I mean, we're talking about potions. We're talking about all the occult and psychic practices. But isn't it amazing that still the angels that were in the glory of God knew the mysteries of the universe, even they, the ones that chose to follow Lucifer and his rebellion, it was the draw of that which God had given to men to procreate, that they inserted themselves in to the human species. Now the question is that, and they did it, as you know, in the Book of Giants. I think it's critical that people understand, when you wrote the Ahriman Gate, you wrote it as fiction, and I'd say this, you'd be hard-pressed outside of the characters to see much fiction in any longer, or Long Walkers. The only thing that was wrong in Long Walkers is I don't know how to control the gates. I know they operate with sound, specific frequencies, and in some cases words. And by the way, what is it, 1001 Arabian Nights? They talk about open sesame. Well, it wasn't just a cave of treasures they were opening, it was a stargate. Most people don't even understand that stuff. So what I'm saying simply is this. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to get the data and information that Tom has written about, that I've written about, because the point is that there comes a time when it's no longer at the door. It's in your living room. No pun intended, and God rebuke every foul and unclean spirit. But there comes a time where you're going to have to know what it is you're fighting, how to fight it, and you're going to have the peace of God that surpasses that all understanding, that in the first chapter of Luke, and this is the promise I'm claiming for myself, Tom, that we might serve God all the days of our life without fear. Because sure enough, the spirit of fear is loosed in the land, and if things that you can't see bother you, wait until you see the nightmare stuff where you don't need they live sunglasses to see it, because it'll be in your face.
You know, what's interesting is there's actually a chapter in Exo Vaticana that's going to start out with Rodney Piper and They Live. But it's actually asking the question, Steve. You mentioned the angels, the fact that even the angels were tempted. I think the post that was put up over on Raiders Today, the Exo Vaticana part 4, raising the fact that some of the ancient texts say that these women were given potions to actually lure men and angels to their bed, sex potions, lust potions. But it was for the purpose, of course, not just of having crazy angelic sex. It was for the purpose of propagating a kind of great deception and mingling humans with alien genetics. And this raises such extraordinary questions. A moment ago, when I think you might have still been offline, I was talking to Doug and Joe about how back when I was a young preacher, who knew everything on earth and had my had my big, my prophecy dispensational map on the wall that would tell me exactly when everything was going to happen, exactly when it was going to happen. I thought the whole idea of angels marrying the women, I thought was the craziest thing I ever heard. But just being honest, studying the actual literature, and over time I came to realize it's the only thing that actually really explains. In fact, I'm at the point now, kind of like Chuck Missler is, and by the way, Chuck Missler is going to write the introduction for Exo Vaticana, but I'm at the point where he says, unless you understand the angel marrying human phenomenon, you cannot even understand the Old Testament. Until you get to the point where you understand what happened in that one single scenario, you cannot understand most of the Old Testament. You definitely can't understand the war between genetics, the seed of the woman, the seed of the man. You can't understand what's even being talked about. And I came to conclude that that's correct. But the question that's going to be asked, the very next question is going to be not just, was there an early vanguard? Did it happen once before? But is it happening right now? Are there on Earth humans that are only part human genetics and they're part something else? Now,
yes.
This is a question that raises a significantly distressful question, and that is whether there are human-like creations on Earth that do not have a redeemable soul in the Judeo-Christian sense. That is, the soul of a human, as different than the nature of any animal, in that man alone was made in God's image, and in the essence of the human person, it is capable of union with God now and transcendence from mortal to redeemed immortality after death. It can be redeemed. This is a debate over a question that right now, probably most people on the internet may not know much about it, but it is a furious debate that is going on among some scholars. It extends as far back as the early Christian fathers throughout the Middle Age, especially during the Inquisition by the Roman Catholic Church. The question of whether there were human-like beings. In other words, they live. Roddy Piper puts on his glasses and finds out they're actually something else, though they look just like humans. And it's the subject of whether hybrid humans can be redeemed. This is a question that resurfaced not long ago. By the way, I was having lunch with the state superintendent of the Oregon District Assemblies of God, Cat Marks, and several other state representatives. And Cat leaned forward and he said, Tom, he said, I just read the novel The Ahriman Gate that you and Anita wrote. It was good. But he said, one thing really bothered me. He said that part where human genetics were combined with what the scientists in the book thought was alien DNA, and this led to the revival of Nephilim. He said, I never liked talking about that subject when I was a pastor because, he said, I hate the implications that there could be mutant humans that cannot be saved. Well, his abhorrence of the issue, of course, is shared by, I think, all people of goodwill, me too. But whether we like it or not, it doesn't change the fact that Nephilim, as described in the Old Testament and in the ancient book of Enoch, were devoid of natural, redeemable souls and spirits. Genesis 6:9, only Noah, and by extension his children, are found perfect in their generation. That's the Hebrew word tamim, which means without blemish or healthy. They're the only ones that can be saved from the flood. The same words used in Leviticus to describe an unblemished sacrificial lamb. And of course, we know that the meaning certainly wasn't that Noah was morally perfect, but that his genetics had not been contaminated with Nephilim descent, as apparently the rest of the world had become. And so in order to preserve mankind as he had made them, God destroys all but Noah's family in the flood. And the ancient records, including those of the Bible, consistently describe the cause of the flood as happening because all flesh became corrupted, both man and beast. That's what the Bible says. Now, on the question of whether the corrupted or altered humans had redeemable souls. This is a very difficult subject to talk about, but note what happened when the watchers asked the prophet to beseech God for the salvation of their children. Enoch 13:3-5. Then I went and spoke to them all together, and they were afraid, and fear and trembling seized them. And they besought me to draw up a petition for them, that they might find forgiveness, and to read their petition in the presence of the Lord of heaven. For from thenceforward they could not speak with him, nor lift up their eyes to heaven, for shame of their sins, for which they had been condemned. End quote. Now Enoch takes this petition to God. He informs the watchers afterward, and their hybrid children. He informs them of their situation, whether they can be redeemed. Here's what he says, Enoch 14:4-7. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared thus, that your petition will not be granted you throughout all the days of eternity, and that judgment has been finally passed upon you. Yea, your petition will not be granted you, and from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven unto all eternity, and in bonds of the earth the decree has gone forth to bind you for all the days of the world, and that previously you shall have seen the destruction of your beloved sons. He's talking about the Nephilim. And ye shall have no pleasure in them, but they shall fall before you by the sword, and your petition on their behalf shall not be granted, nor yet on your own, even though you weep and pray and speak all the words contained in the writing which I have written, end quote, Enoch 14:4-7. So therefore, based on the book of Enoch, and reflected in the Bible, by the way, in such places as Genesis, Jude, 2 Peter, redemption was not possible for any of the fallen watchers or their hybrid offspring, even though the Nephilim were part human. Now, in that sense, Nephilim, maybe they're compared to an extraordinary primate, intelligent like men and angels, maybe even possessing human genetics, but not Homo sapien, as fashioned by God in his image. There's further confirmation of their status as unredeemable. And we also learn from the strange narrative that there was this primeval belief that's reflected in the Old Testament concerning two types of resurrection from the dead. One that's strictly terrestrial, that is, a dead Nephilim can return from the grave to inhabit another corruptible body of flesh. But a second future resurrection in which eternal glorified bodies are only for those who sleep in Christ. And Isaiah makes it very clear that the watcher offspring, in this chapter 26:14, he refers to them as the Raphaim, that they cannot participate in the latter resurrection. In in chapter 26:14, he says, they are dead, they shall not live. They are deceased, that is Raphaim, they shall not rise. Therefore, thou hast visited and destroyed them and made all their memory to perish, end quote. The word that's rendered deceased from the Hebrew there is shades or ghosts of the dead. So we see echoed how the term Raphaim is used in two senses. One for human and Nephilim, spirits in the underworld, but in another sense for terrestrial giants. And we're going to write something that's never been written before in Exo Vaticana, in which we're taking the Rosh Shamra text, ancient writings from Ugarit in northern Syria, in which there are Canaanite rituals for summoning the Raphaim from the underworld, and how to bring them forth so that they can be manifested in bodies of flesh.